There is a mistake that I forgot to correct in the bulletin. I gave Pat Schroeder a wrong date when she typed the bulletin for the eat and greet. It's the 21st of the month instead of the 14th. And that'll be at the Cornerstone Grill. Those are fun times when we all get together, who wants to, and we just have dinner and fellowship. The reading that Chris just did, you'll notice there is a gap between the 17th verse and 28th, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I knew that Chris was reading this morning, and he doesn't like to read long scriptures. So I eliminated a few of the verses. But we had to introduce it because this is a passage about Lazarus. And I even had to explain that to one of our members this morning. And I said, you know, those who know the Bible know the story of Lazarus. So, but there is another comment that I like to make. And this is a trivia question. Sometimes people will ask, what is the shortest verse in the Bible? Well, it's normally given as 2 words, because most translations of the Bible use that passage to say Jesus wept, not Jesus began to weep. So if you're ever in a trivia deal, that's it. Jesus wept is the shortest passage in the Bible. In addition to being a very beautiful song that the choir just sang for us this morning, there is a great message in that song that we should all remember. We never forget that the lighthouse on the hill is God. And whenever we are tossed, whenever we are disturbed or in trouble, it sends out the light that we all may see. If it weren't for this lighthouse, where would this ship be? If it weren't for God, where would we be? As death drew near for a 70-year-old man, a cousin was heard to say to the man's wife, "Don't worry, Agatha. It seems dark now, but in time, you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel." Some at times like that use a little different cliche. They say, well, it's always darkest before the dawn. You know, in times like that, those statements are not helpful at all. And particularly here is Agatha about to become a widow. And she simply sighs and she said to herself, do they understand? Do they really get it? Do they know what I'm going through? Well, it may have seemed exactly like that to the sisters, Martha and Mary, as they were facing the death of their brother Lazarus. Here their brother is dying, and Jesus even delays his trip to be with them for 2 days, as if it isn't important. Well, it asks the question, should the dying always be healed? Should the dead always be brought back to life? Of the hundreds and thousands of Jews who died, how many were brought back? Not too many that I know of. Of the thousands who were sick and who were near death, how many of them were rescued and saved from dying? I don't read about too many of them. Certainly none of the disciples were saved. Some of them died of martyrdom, and maybe some of them just died of plain old age. You see, the vast majority of Jews lived and died like you and I, according to the laws of nature, being healthy or maybe catching a disease, dying after a long life, or being kicked in the head as a young person by a camel. You see, it's only in recent times that we have been able to control and postpone death, or to try to heal those who were near death. Even today, the so-called heroic measures that we use in the hospitals are really called extraordinary means. Pumps, suction equipment, drips, respirators, heart, lung machines, dialysis, defibrillators, all kinds of machinery and powerful technology, wonder drugs. The list grows longer and longer as there's more and more research and study in how to prolong life. The Bible tells us there is a time to live and a time to die. We know that our life cycles have a beginning and they have an end. The letter to the Hebrews implies as much in a very cryptic phase. It says, "It is appointed to mortals to die." Pretty simple. Being mortal means that death will be in the picture for all of us sooner or later. And just as death is always inevitable, there is also an undeniable darkness about it, no matter how much we accept it. There's an ominous bleakness about it that makes us cringe and draw back. It is only natural that Martha and Mary wished it had been otherwise. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother would not have died." Not only were Martha and Mary weeping and saddened, so were their neighbors. And John reports simply, Jesus wept. It was a dark time for everybody. You ever wonder why did Jesus raise Lazarus? Nowhere does it say that it was done for his benefit. There is no report that Lazarus said, "Thank you, Jesus." There's no report that says that Lazarus really even wanted to be brought back from the dead, only to live and then die again. There is nothing in the story to indicate that Jesus brought Lazarus back for Martha and Mary. Jesus states quite clearly 4 times in this short story the purpose and the meaning of this particular raising of Lazarus. 1, the first reason he did it is for the glory of God. 2, so that you, the disciples, may believe. 3, he says, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" And the 4th is for the people who were standing around. Jesus was always the teacher. And no matter what the set of circumstances were, he always adds a moral lesson to the healings and the other works of wonder that he does. To one person, he says after the healing, "Go and sin no more." The goal that she needed to attain was to learn the need to change her life. And once she learned that lesson, his healing was worthwhile. Jesus used signs of wonder to open people's eyes and to foster their faith. But he looked upon these healings and these works of wonder that he did as a means to an end. He didn't mean them in an end to itself. The raising of Lazarus was a means to an end. It was not an end in itself. For example, one time Jesus was a bit put out that people wanted to be entertained without getting the lesson straight. In the 16th chapter of Matthew, he has an encounter with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and it says, and to test him, they asked him to show a sign from heaven. And Jesus rebuked them and said, an evil and adulterous generation asked for a sign. And to the official at Capernaum, whose son was ill, Jesus said, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. You see, we don't have to see signs of wonder. We simply need to develop a deep faith, a beautiful faith that is expressed in the words of the choir, of the song the choir sang to us this morning. There's a lighthouse on the hillside that overlooks the sea. When I'm tossed, it sends out a light that I might see. And the light that shines in the darkness now will safely lead us o'er. If it wasn't for that lighthouse, my ship would be no more. And I thank God for the lighthouse. I owe my life to him. For Jesus is the lighthouse. And from the rocks of sin, he has shone that light around me that I could clearly see. If it wasn't for that lighthouse, where would this ship be? We need to see the light in the darkness is the theme of that song and the theme of the sermon. We need to see the light in the darkness of our life. We need to agree that the solution to any and all of our problems is not to deny the darkness, whether it be a fatal illness, a debilitating illness, unemployment, the loss of loved ones, despair, loss of status in life. Pastor still tells a story that a once deteriorating man who was going through tremendous despair was sitting across from him, and he shared that he had just now come from a park where he had been sitting for 4 hours. And this park had a rather large river that was rather fast flowing through the park. And this man sat there contemplating suicide for about 4 hours. And he came over across the street from the park to visit with the pastor and tell him about the darkness that he was in. The pastor sent him to a group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there he found a power greater than himself. And he became a new person. He had been dead long enough, and he was ready to leave the spiritual darkness behind him. Jesus said, what I tell you in the dark, utter it in the light. And what you hear whispered, proclaim from the rooftops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both the body and the soul. Can we realize and understand that light that shines for us? Can we have less fear of death, whether we are killed by cancer old age, heart attacks, car accidents, war, or an intruder who is coming into our home than we fear the loss of our own integrity, our identity, and our personhood. You see, Jesus did not hesitate to head directly into what anyone, especially even the disciples, would know were dark days. His disciples doubted that if he should even go back to where Martha and Mary lived, where they were grieving about Lazarus. That was on the very outskirts of Bethlehem or Jerusalem. And Jesus had just recently escaped from Jerusalem within an inch of his life. Rabbi, the Jews said, they were now seeking to destroy you, to stone you to death. Are you going back there again? His reply was, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, in the dark, he stumbles because the light is not with him. Maybe, just maybe, the light is really not at the end of the tunnel. Rather, it is in and within one's self. The Quakers refer to this light as the inner light. Faith is inside the person, not out there somewhere. We read about the Spirit dwelling within, guiding us and sanctifying us. That light guided and empowered Jesus even in his own darkness of Good Friday. The Christmas story of the Bible talks about coming into the world of true wisdom and true light. It goes like this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was within God. What has come into being in him was life, and life was the light of all the people. The light shines in the darkness, and the world did not overcome it. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. See, what we are learning is that Christ is a beacon, guiding us through an oftentimes dark journey, even through death. Jesus said to Martha and Mary, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And you see, that would be true for Lazarus in the long run. It would be true for Martha and Mary. It would be true for Jesus. And it will be true for you and for me. People who live in the northern countries of the world often experience periods of time where there is little or no light at all during the winter months. And they seem to have a greater appreciation of light than those of us who live in the southern areas. And there is a Danish hymn which speaks about the life-saving function of light. There is this island surrounded by rough seas. There are lighthouses to guide the fishermen and crews of merchant freighters who are hoping to see that life that indicates they're coming in to a safe harbor. And this Danish hymn goes like this: Our Father has a light in his window. It shines through the darkening night and carries a friendly greeting to all from the Lord of light. Our Father has a light in the window. It brightens the darkest road. It comforts in need and sorrow and points us the way to God. Our Father has a light in the window. It beckons through storm and gloom, and beaming with loving kindness, it bids us come home. Come home. Amen.